Welcome to Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. I'm your host, Dean Anderson, and this is a show about addiction and substance use and how it impacts our community. Today on the show, we have John Steffler. John is the founder of the Tanner Steffler Foundation. Thanks for being here, John.
Thanks, Dean. Glad to be here and happy to just converse today.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm really looking forward to having you on the show. You've got a very unique story and the foundation that you created. And if you could just right off the bat, just tell me about the Tanner Steffler Foundation.
Yeah, for sure. Our Tanner Steffler Foundation was created after the loss of our son, Heather, my wife and I. He died of an opiate overdose in June of 2017. As a parent, and as a parent of an addicted son, the system just wasn't providing the comfort we needed. So, along with the proper channels of an incorporation, a charitable designation, doing it right for some validity, we created the foundation. The goal is to create a culture of change for youth mental health and addiction for youth ages 12 to 28. The thought process was more people would know Tanner and his struggles after his living than when he was alive. Mm-hmm. So, quite frankly, it's just a foundation out of passion, and what we do is just to fill gaps and help our local residents of here in Perth County.
I love what you're doing. I'm so envious of the work that you're doing. It's terrible that it took this to get to this point of being able to create the foundation, but
right.
the passion that you've made from the pain is wonderful, and I commend you and your wife for pushing that forward. So first off, just thank you very much for doing what you're doing.
No problem.
The questions I want to ask is, when you recognized some of these gaps and when you wanted to push forward and to work forward, what were some of the gaps that stood out that were the largest that you were like, wow, I can't believe that this is a gap?
Lack of knowledge on up where we are, but now we're north of the city. There's a lot of services, but nobody truly knows what they are. The current healthcare system, where Tanner went into the hospital the night before his passing with an addiction issue, never once checked for addiction, sent home, died the next day. No beds in the hospital, but there's floors of hospital beds empty. So the culture of change wasn't as much about what's wrong, but if we don't change the way we do business in healthcare, our healthcare system's going to continue to fail. All we hear time and time throughout the media is more money towards this. We need more money for nurses. We need more money for hospitals. We need more. Money is great, but money's not going to solve it if we keep treating the business the same way we did since 1967 when OHIP was created. The culture needs to change. It's starting to get better. I use mental health and addiction a little bit like racism, where, what used to be tolerated is no longer even in question. It's a total taboo topic and we don't understand it.
Right.
You can't treat addiction and mental health by ignoring it, by shame, by stigma. You can't. You have to talk your story. You have to speak your story. Everybody has a story, be proud. But most importantly, the healthcare system, the families need the support, because ultimately, the brain is an organ, just like the heart is an organ, just like the lungs are an organ, but we treat them differently because we can't see addiction. We can't see mental health. The youth, if we don't start changing the attitudes and listening to what the youth want, this more and more of the same is going to continue to happen, and that's just not tolerable.
Right. So I like, I'm gonna do a little shout out to the show right here, because you said we can't see it. We can't see the mental health. We can't see the addiction. So therefore, it's invisible.
That's correct. Isn't that? Yeah. We'll just ignore it then.
And here we are. So let's just ignore it then. What is the focus of the foundation in trying to make some of these changes? We all recognize it. So a real quick segue is I note that you're from north of the city of London, and most of our guests are more London focused in this area, right. But I want to make very clear that this isn't specific to your demographic. It's the entire Canada. It's not just something that's just local, right?
Great. So exactly, Dean. So what we want to do for our area is create something that other areas can grab, take, and use and utilize. Where we come from in rural, which is only truly about a 45-minute drive,
Yeah.
we lack in population, but we have in people. So everybody comes together to rally to make change. That change can then be basically utilized anywhere throughout. And one of the commonalities that we see, whether it be in London, whether it be in Toronto, whether we see it in Seaforth, where I'm from, really is the lack of empathy, the lack of compassion. It's more everybody that is working in the healthcare system or the mental health, addiction, social work system in the public area are truly burnt out. You can't keep asking more from the same people who have constantly given their whole lives. The process has to change. London, you look at the Health Science Center, I just was following the CFPL, the CTV, the Rogers. There's a gentleman living 2 weeks ago outside of the Health Science Center
I was seeing
hospital.
that, yeah.
Homelessness. This is a societal problem, not a Huron County problem. For us to make the most change in the foundation, we had to stay small. But our problems are not small. Our problems are not only Ontario-wide, Canada-wide, worldwide. So we have to look out for each other.
One of my favorite sayings now is we keep talking about how we have to change society, but really what we need to look at is that we are society.
We are society,
Right?
that's right.
Individually. So this, small and mighty numbers, small but mighty numbers in Seaforth can really paint a picture for bigger systems and what we can do in larger, I don't want to call us a metropolis, but in the larger cities like London,
the urban versus the rural, that's right. And I guess the quote we use a lot is be better.
Yeah.
If you see an individual struggling, be compassionate. Don't be stigmatic. Lend a hand.
Right.
Don't walk away. That not one individual with mental health or addiction grew up as a young male, female, on a playground wanting to be in a vulnerable position. Not one.
Right.
So this isn't about choice. Because if it was a choice and it was that damn easy, we'd choose not to.
Right.
This is a chemical, this is a brain disease that we need to learn more about, become more accepting. And it's a community disease. So mental health addiction, we cannot live alone.
Right.
We have to live it in real time because it changes so quickly. Not one mental health episode or one addiction episode is the same as another. You have to be able to adapt, to react, and turn. One of the biggest things that kind of makes me go, oh, really? Is when I first reach out as an individual with a mental health or an addiction challenge, I go to my doctor for a 13-minute appointment, because that's what I'm allotted through public health care, maybe give or take a couple minutes. But then I get a medication that changes my life with no follow-up. I don't blame any one individual. That's the system we have. How about counseling, navigation, support, medication? It's a combination. You don't go into your diabetes appointment and say, no more sugar, you're good. Or here's a pill, your blood sugar, keep eating what you want. No, you need to talk to the dietitian. You need to get some, different tips and different life changes that will help you.
Right.
So another time, I guess I talked a lot with my hands, but you look at wait times. Okay, well, how can you fix a wait time? You can't fix a wait time by just hiring more people and at the same time say, okay, everybody speak up, be loud, be proud. It just doesn't balance. We have to change the way we view mental health, we view addiction, and we're getting there. This is not a slam, like I go back to racism, what was accepted before is not accepted now. Same with mental health, same with addiction. We're having harm reduction. That's a good thing. Why is it a good thing? Because it reduces visits to the ER in other ways. It helps the individual normalize. You have education. So now when a family practitioner is going through medical school, they do have education on mental health. Prior, it was an elective. We have shows like this. We have people speaking out, like ourselves in the foundation, that aren't ready or aren't wanting to keep the system as is. Because Tanner never was afforded the opportunity to truly live the life he deserved. One of the biggest things that I go into, and this is a personal story. Tanner went in 2 days before he passed away, and he was sent home. My mother, rest her soul, 1 year to the day later went in with a heart attack. She was sent to Kitchener Hospital. She was then sent to London Hospital to maintain the quality of life that at 75 years old she deserved. And guess what? It afforded her 2 more years of living that Tanner wasn't. Again, going back to what we said earlier, the heart and the brain are treated 2 different ways in our current medical system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing is treat the whole person.
Treat the person.
It's a whole person, and we want to treat the bits and pieces, or look at it as so often it's seen as. And I think one of the biggest things that we have to deal with stigma is it automatically says it's a choice. And if it's a choice for you to put drug or alcohol in your body, therefore it's your choice to leave and go, and you can fix your own problem and you just go deal with it. But the reality of it is it's not that.
That's correct. It might have started out as a choice to have that drink, to have that drug. Mm-hmm. But we also agree that mechanism, that chemical changes your brain. Mm-hmm. Or you wouldn't take it. Mm-hmm. So once your brain is altered, your decisions are altered. Mm-hmm. So then it doesn't become a choice.
Yeah.
So I think it's, always up for debate and a good conversation. However, the reality of the practicality is nobody ever chose to, when you're a young person, to live a vulnerable life. We all wanted success. We all dreamed of being the next NHL hockey player, the teacher that helped others, the doctor. When you're young is when we can learn the most, and that's why the foundation wants to listen to the youth. Some of our foundation biggest goals and wins were we help fund through the community. We're not government funded, we're grassroots funded, but the community came together and we funded mental health and wellness coaches in our high schools.
Nice.
So again, bringing the professionals to where the youth are. A third of every day, 8 hours, is where the youth are. So we might as well bring the mental health and wellness coaches to the students. We have great teachers. We have great police officers. We have great doctors. Doesn't mean they're great mental health and addiction professionals.
Right.
Right? I'm a mortgage broker. Doesn't mean that I'm a great doctor. Like, come on, we can't mix the career paths. We need to support them. And I think that's what we're learning the most is putting the young person in the best possible area for success.
I 100% agree. And we had somebody on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about policing, and not just that, but right across the board, we constantly have people expected to wear multiple hats. And I think you're right that we need to start infusing more of this information and more people and cross-pollinating that information to make a better system.
Right, a better system, right?
The best that we can. So I want to thank you for being on the show and sharing all your knowledge. I want to, just take a step back and say, wow, are you ever versed and understood in what's going on? Not just today, but we had coffee last week. For a mortgage broker, you know more than some of the professionals in the field that I know. And it's fantastic to have you on the show today and to be able to share some of your passage and knowledge. If I can ask you just one thing, if you could give a parent that's struggling with substance use, their child struggling with substance use, one quick piece of advice, what would it be?
Hang in there. It won't be easy, and each day is different.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dean, for having me, and thanks again. Great to meet you.
My pleasure. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. Our next guest is Sarah Montez. Sarah's a lived experience counselor from Epic Recovery here in London. Thanks for being on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dean. Thank you.
I am a big fan, as you already know, of you and everything that you do, and the last few years, all the energy that you've been putting into the recovery community and the work you've been doing.
Thank you.
Our previous guest was talking about the loss of a loved one and the impact it has on parenting. And I know that you do some work with families and family members, and I would love to hear some of your perspective on what it looks like to work with specifically parents dealing with children in substance use disorder and addiction?
Absolutely, thank you. Addiction is such a complex, multifaceted issue that families deal with. Often we think it's just the individual navigating that particular addiction, but really it does impact the entire family. And as parents, we have these complexities of our own identity and our own value as it relates to our children and navigating this really tough issue.
Yeah, the bringing up the values. I don't think most people recognize, and I do it in my own work as well, talking with people, that when we're trying to help somebody else, we're trying to tell the other person to get the help based on how I think they should get the help based on my values.
Absolutely, and especially as a parent, we have this idea, this pressure that we are responsible for our children's success. And when they are unable to attain that as a result of addiction, then that attacks our personal value, even in our own head and heart. And we do feel those pressures as well from outside. So working with parents, I help them to identify their own values, their own identity outside of being a parent. And that includes self-care, that includes communication and boundaries, and especially as it relates to adult children.
Communication, I recognize out of that, as probably one of the bigger things, and I also see that when people are struggling, that's somewhere that they go to. How do I talk to my child? How do I have the conversation? Every time I go there, I hit a brick wall, and it's very difficult. Where do you start in those ideas of communication, and what does that look like?
Well, I would say communication's a large barrier for most relationships. And much of that comes from our own emotions. And so when we can, as parents, again, assess how we're feeling in any particular moment, that will help us know how we're going to communicate. So again, going back to, you asked earlier about feelings and values. And so when I'm talking to my child, whether adult or even younger, about their addiction, am I trying to fix how I feel, or am I trying to support them as they navigate what they're going through?
I'm very cautious when I explain this to some people as I try to encourage them to recognize that most of the time they want someone else to do what they want to do because it makes them feel better about the situation, and it's not as empathetic as they might think.
Absolutely, and of course we want to support our family members. We love them, and our children in particular. We love them, and we've given so much time and effort and much of our lives to do so, and so we can push and impose these expectations and these ideas for that love. But of course, there is that underside of, how do I feel? I'm uncomfortable with your suffering. So if you could please just fix that, because your suffering is making me suffer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very complex dynamic. And then the parent and the child, I mean, like, I've got children, and I recognize that when I have conversations with them, there's lots of times that they just push away naturally. I don't want to listen to mom. I don't want to listen to dad.
Absolutely.
And there's always that push and pull of the relationship to start with. Then you add a little bit of substance use or the problems with this and different dynamics in there. That push and pull becomes worse. How do you propose that family members would be able to soften that, or be able to allow people to gain more access and not have so much friction?
Well, ideally, in a perfect world, it starts off in early childhood. But we don't always have that opportunity because we as parents bring our own hurts and traumas and expectations and learned behaviors into that relationship. So it really is a learning opportunity for the entire family. I would say that those conversations start softly and slowly and smallly. Smallly, is that a word? In a small way?
In a small way, smallly.
And asking questions. As a parent, can I be curious about my child? Can I ask really good questions and not be the expert all the time?
I love the open-ended question piece. So we use that not just with children or youth, but just as part of the counseling process.
Absolutely.
We're constantly saying, tell me why you like this thing, or tell me why you participate in this. And then they have the opportunity to talk about it, opposed to, I think you should.
Of course.
Wow.
Absolutely. We want to impose, again, these are our own expectations of how things should be and how things should go. And if we can provide a safe space, because we don't have the luxury of being curious if we don't feel safe. And that's true for our children as well. And so if we can create this space where everyone feels safe to be able to speak about what they're feeling and what they think and what they might believe is a solution.
Safety is a major component to being able to break down those walls and get somebody to feeling vulnerable to want to make changes. Outside of, the verbal communication piece, can you think of, ideas or thoughts about creating safety in the household or in the environment to allow somebody to be able to be vulnerable?
Absolutely. I think as a parent, it's really important to be open and honest about your own mistakes, where perhaps you have communicated in an aggressive way. I think it's also important to even just monitor your body language. It's a huge portion of how we communicate. So as a parent, if I'm feeling threatened or uncomfortable, as we talked about earlier, by my child's suffering or their feelings, how am I going to respond in the tone of my voice, in my body? Am I drawing close to them? Am I drawing away? Are my arms crossed? I think the overall tone emotionally in the home is really, really important to be able to create that safe place.
So learning how to do these things, we can really quickly recognize that the society doesn't have, you're not learning this, body language and how to communicate in a healthy way through your condo board. I mean, you're right. You're not being taught these things in everyday life anywhere.
Absolutely.
So, the parents are usually encouraged to say, you need to learn new ways of doing things in order to do this, because that's where it comes down to. But the objection that I think most is met with most people is, well, I'm not the one that's sick.
Absolutely. And as parents and loved ones and even spouses, we can actually get caught in these very same cycles of, I don't like this feeling, help me escape this feeling. And we create these behaviors, these rituals to avoid how our family member is behaving. And we can, in fact, actually become just as sick. And we get caught up in that pattern. And I just want to touch on this piece of communication. Someone really intelligent once said to me, it's a huge part of relationships, and we spend very little time learning how to do it.
Yeah, right? When you think about it, that's one of my things as well, because I see where we, in education and school, we spend, years and years in university and high school and whatever to learn how to, have a career and a job that I do 40 hours a week, but relationships I have every single day.
That's right.
And how many hours did I put into the education and learning of that? And we don't have it. So we definitely have an opportunity as a whole, as a society. I think you even said it earlier today. As a society, we have it all as we could do better at communicating.
Absolutely.
Not just as a parent. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, as I said earlier, we as parents bring these ideas, expectations, learned behaviors, hurts and traumas into that relationship. So as much as we are expecting our children to unlearn, relearn, or change how they behave, we need to look in the mirror as well. What do I need to unlearn? What do I need to change? What do I need to adapt in order to support my child without causing more shame and perpetuating this stigma around addiction, not only in my home and family, but in the community?
No one wants to be challenged on their ideas, especially parenting, and looking at how my parenting might have contributed to the substance use. And I spoke to one of my clients the other day and saying, what was my role in it? And I said, well, you'll probably never know. You'll probably never know what your role in it was, because the person who with the addiction doesn't know what your role is. So
Absolutely.
There's part of it where I believe that we have to kind of step back and say, that's not relevant right now, and I need to just figure out how to be healthy about moving forward in the direction that I'm going with my thing. And what and the part I want to amplify what you said is the family member can very easily want to avoid themselves, their own discomfort and their own pain, and then their focus becomes, I'm going to look at this other person and I'm going to focus on what they're doing wrong.
That's
and
right.
then I don't have to look at me and my discomfort or changing me because I'm focused on you and what you're doing wrong.
Right. And because it's very, very uncomfortable. And then that turns into us being controlling and manipulative as parents to try to help our kids. It all comes from a place of love and support. But at times we can actually do more harm. I, as a parent, have found myself doing those things as well. It's really, really difficult.
I remember saying to my father one time, we need to learn and teach emotional intelligence and communication in the school system, and we need to, and many people go, well, it's not, the responsibility of the school system, and we're putting everything off on people. But my father said to me, he goes, it's a parent's job to learn to teach that to the kids. And I paused and I took a deep breath and I looked at him and I very stoically and said, oh yeah, where'd you learn it? And then he realized that his father didn't teach him, and then his father didn't teach him, and there's this generational thing, and we just keep thinking that we need to pass this down, and this is what's normal, and we get to this point where if it's worked this far, it must be right.
Absolutely. I have this idea, and I talk about it often, that we as parents, we as human beings, and I believe this with my whole heart, at any given moment, we are doing the best that we can, and we can do better. And that's this dialectic idea. Both things, they're opposing, but they're very, very true. And so as parents, we bring that to the table, and we assume that as parents, we should know. But how? How do we know?
Yeah, I love this, the psychological phenomenon of acceptance. When somebody accepts exactly where they are, they have then the strength and courage to move on, to grow.
Absolutely.
If they're in denial and arguing and fighting with where they are, they're going to spend more time trying to change the past and fight who they are, which doesn't allow them the energy and the strength to move forward.
Absolutely. And I think we can get that idea, this pressure of not accepting and always achieving and always doing better and being better through the world and social media. And I as a mom, I look at social media, and at times I struggle, and I feel even some shame about, oh, do I even measure up? And do I want to look at myself? That's really hard.
And so, I mean, we're talking about this whole discomfort, and I want to hone in and really, kind of push it in the direction of talking about the specific stigma and shame that happens as a result of community, the schools, the teachers. There's all of these other people looking at your parenting skills, and how that impacts the healing process with stigma and shame.
I think opportunities like this, platforms like this, can really begin to open that door to conversation. Again, it comes down to communication and conversation. If we as parents can be open and honest with whether it's the teachers or the community or our kids, we can all learn together. And I think goes back to that point of radical acceptance, where I am right now. Having these conversations are vital. And it needs to go beyond this. It needs to happen around the dinner tables. It needs to happen in the classroom. These conversations need to be had. I believe it's a 12-step AA saying, but it's you're only as sick as your secrets is kind of the thing. And even Brene Brown talking about shame, she says, the idea of keeping secrets says that I have something to hide, so therefore it must be shameful, right? Yes.
The concept of it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all secrets are shameful, or
Sure.
there's appropriate times to keep things, but there's times when we say, if I had cancer, I would talk about it. If I had diabetes, I'd talk about it. If my child had lupus, I would talk about it.
Absolutely.
But my child has an addiction and I don't talk about it. And there's this built-in stigma that kind of comes into that. So what you're saying is the more that we have these dialogue, the more we'll break that down.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show, Sarah. Well, I'm sure we'll have you again, and you can get a hold of Sarah at epicrecovery.ca, and we'll be right back after this message. So the best advice that we can give you at the end of today's episode is to reach out and ask for help, get a better understanding of mental health and addiction, the communication and the ways that you're going to do it, and remember to be patient with the process and how things are going, and you'll get there. You got this. Thanks for watching Invisible.